And on behalf of the 38,000 men and women of the FBI all across the country and around the world, your extended FBI family, thank you for a job well done. And it is now my privilege to present to you, in many ways, the highest honor we can bestow on somebody, the ultimate demonstration of the FBI's respect and admiration for a leader and a partner, and something that I think you're going to particularly appreciate, given that childhood dream of yours. So, on behalf of the 38,000 men and women of the FBI, I want to present to you your very own Tommy gun.
That was former FBI Director Christopher Wray at a farewell ceremony for former Attorney General Merrick Garland, January 16, 2025. Attorney General Garland left the Justice Department at the end of the Biden administration, and he left with a Tommy gun, the Thompson submachine gun, a mainstay of both criminals and law enforcement in the 1920s during Prohibition, and a featured weapon during the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. February 14, 1929, 7 members of Chicago's North Side gang lined up against a garage wall and shot by 4 unknown assailants, 2 of whom disguised as police officers. Over the near century since it happened, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre has been portrayed in media and in movies, and it's been cited by politicians equally as long to make points about policy and legislation. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day, so this episode of C-SPAN's Podcast The Weekly marks that romantic, sweet holiday when Americans unify by celebrating love and friendship by remembering a horrific, bloody massacre. We begin not with a clip, but with a congressional record. 1938, 9 years after the St. Valentine's Day Massacre and 41 years before Congress would go on TV. January 15, 1938, the Senate is debating legislation on lynching. Specifically, a bill to assure to persons within the jurisdiction of every state the equal protection of the laws and to punish the crime of lynching. Senator Robert Reynolds, Democrat of North Carolina, opposes the bill because, he argues, it was anti-South and pro-North. According to the congressional record, Senator Reynolds says this to the Senate: if in the city of New York, to employ the parlance of the modern 20th century gangster, a man is taken for a ride in an automobile by 3 or more men and is filled full of lead, in all truthfulness and in all reality, and according to the proper interpretation, that is a lynching, but there is an exemption of it under this bill. Then Senator Reynolds adds this: I cannot understand why the gangsters who today are carrying on, we will say for illustration, in the city of Chicago under the direction of Al Capone's outfit should be exempted from the provisions of this bill. Although Al Capone is incarcerated in the prison on an island in San Francisco Bay, we all know that Capone's gangsters are really carrying on today in the city of Chicago as they did during the time Capone was there. A couple of years ago, we read of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in the city of Chicago. On that occasion, several of the henchmen of Al Capone, at the insistence and under the direction of their chieftain, Al Capone, disguised themselves in the apparel of policemen, in the uniform of Chicago patrolmen, and on the particular day in question, at a set hour, they put their appearance at a garage which was owned and being conducted by a rival gang. Capone's gangsters, so it is said, in the uniform of Chicago patrolmen, walked boldly into that garage and shot down in cold blood 6 or 7, or perhaps more, rival gangsters when their backs were turned to Capone's henchmen. They were shot down in cold blood when they were facing the wall. Now we get to when Congress is on TV. November 20th, 1989, House Republican leader Bob Michel is talking about the murder of 6 priests in El Salvador, shot by a then unknown assailant during the Salvadoran Civil War.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania made the point so well just a moment ago with respect to the certainty, really the uncertainty of our being certain about who committed it. Maybe it's because I come from Illinois and Chicago's in Illinois, but I remember the days when old Bugsy Siegel, was dressed up the doggone his troops in police uniforms for the Valentine's Day Massacre. It's happened. It's a methodology by which you can really deceive people.
By the way, Bob Michel mentioned Bugsy Siegel. He probably meant to say Al Capone. Pat Moynihan got it right. On February 18, 1993, the Democrat from New York was on the Senate floor. It was a lengthy policy discussion about the war on drugs, and he cited Al Capone.
On February 14, 1929, in Chicago, at the height of Prohibition, not the height of, but in the period of Prohibition, Al Capone, as it is understood, I don't believe the matter was ever resolved, decided he would send a Valentine to Bugs Moran, and whatever the case, four people arrived in Chicago in police uniforms, and they found 7 men in a garage, and they suggested that they were going to go through a routine police raid and no doubt take $100 when they left, but it was just one of those normal events in Chicago at the time, and they asked these people to line up against the wall, and then instead of just frisking them and making their collection for the day, they machine gunned them to death. It's called the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. It has entered into the American folk memory. There's scarcely a year goes by there's not a movie that portrays it in some way or another. It has 2 entries in the World Book Encyclopedia, shocked the nation, and it led to the, in part, I would argue, to the repeal of Prohibition, the amendment of the Constitution. But the prohibition on drug use continued.
The next year, it was President Bill Clinton's turn to cite the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. He was speaking on February 15, 1994, the day after Valentine's Day, remarks to the law enforcement community in London, Ohio.
In the last 3 decades, violent crimes have increased by 300%. Over the last 3 years, almost a third of Americans have either had themselves or someone in their families victimized by crime. Yesterday was the 65th anniversary of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Chicago, which captured the entire nation's attention. The country was riveted by the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Some of you may be old enough to remember it as children. I have seen movies about it. It absolutely galvanized the nation. In 1929, 7 people were killed. That was a massacre in 1929. In most cities today, it's a normal weekend.
California Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein brought up the massacre during a December 6, 2017 hearing. The topic, proposed new firearm registration laws.
The National Firearms Act was enacted in 1934 to strictly regulate machine guns. It was passed in response to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre of 1929, when Thompson machine guns, called Tommy guns, were used in a Chicago mass shooting by mobster gang members. The original law heavily regulated machine guns, but later the law was updated in 1986 to ban all future automatic weapons from private possession.
And as recently as 2 years ago, here's Congressman Sean Casten, Democrat of Illinois, January 26, 2023, supporting a ban on assault weapons.
This has been a bloody week in America. Seems like every day we've woken up to news of another mass shooting, starting with the one 5 days ago, when a gunman armed with an assault pistol and a high-capacity magazine killed 11 Californians as they celebrated Lunar New Year. 3 weeks from now, Valentine's Day will be the 15th anniversary of a mass shooting at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb. The shooter started firing at 3:06 p.m. By 3:11 p.m., just 5 minutes later, he had taken his own life, but not before firing off 55 rounds of ammunition, killing 6 people and injuring another 21. In Parkland, Florida, on Valentine's Day, they don't memorialize Northern Illinois University. They memorialize the anniversary of the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. That shooting lasted for 6 minutes. 139 rounds were fired, 17 people were killed, and 17 were injured. And 6 months from now, on Independence Day, folks in Highland Park, Illinois, will be memorializing the first anniversary of a mass shooting when 83 rounds were fired, 7 people were killed, and 48 were injured before the police who were present at the scene could even identify the location of the shooter. We do not get our holidays back unless we act. And too often, this body has responded with thoughts and prayers. Prayers that the American people won't notice. Some of my colleagues who are putting the economic interests of gun manufacturers ahead of people's lives. But every once in a while we do act. And I want to talk about what we're capable of when we are touched by the better angels of our nature. And to do that, let's flash back to another Valentine's Day. Not that long ago, two Chicago gangs were fighting over narcotics turf. One of them surprised the other, broke in, flash of bullets, 7 people were dead. Chicagoans, Illinoisans, Americans were outraged. Yes, these were gang members, but they didn't deserve to die. That was in 1929. It was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. It was an Al Capone's Italian gang, killed 7 members of Bugs Moran's Irish gang as whiskey bootleggers, fighting over drug turf. And we acted. That shooting led to the passage of the National Firearms Act that banned civilian access to fully automatic Tommy guns and any rifle with a barrel longer than 18 inches. That law is still on the books today. It saves lives, and no one has ever claimed it was unconstitutional. And oh, by the way, if you weren't expecting that a story about Chicago gangs was going to be about white people, I'd like to thank you for attending today's class in critical race theory. As that poet Ice Cube says, you better check yourself. But I digress. 7 people died in 1929, and we acted.
Several times you heard politicians mention Al Capone in connection with the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, but experts say he didn't do it. Book TV has covered 2 authors who wrote Al Capone biographies. Here's Jonathan Eig, author of Get Capone.
I don't think Capone did it. I don't think he had anything to do with the Valentine's Day Massacre. I think it's important to Capone because it's the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Absolutely.
This crime horrifies the nation. You've got these photos of these brains basically lying next to people's hats on the floor of this garage on Clark Street, 7 men dead. And these photos horrify the country, and they really light a fire under the federal government to put Capone away. So it's a key moment in his life and career, and it's the moment at which there's no going back. But ironically, one of many ironies soon to come in Capone's life, ironically, I don't think he had anything to do with it.
And here's Deirdre Blair, author of Al Capone, His Life, Legacy, and Legend.
Al didn't get his hands dirty with the shoe shine kit, and he didn't get his hands dirty with the murders. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which, if you're like me, one morning I had 12 different books spread out in my office as I was trying to arrive at certainty, and every single one of them had a different version of who did what to whom. So I gave up on trying to settle that question once and for all. But the point is, when the St. Valentine's Day Massacre took place, Al Capone was throwing a party for Miami city government officials in his Miami house. And that's one of the ways he got away with it. No murder was ever pinned on him. As everybody seems to know, he went to jail for tax evasion, and even that was very shaky because income tax was so new and there were so many differences in the laws at the time.
And now, a bonus clip. Researching this podcast, we learned something fascinating about the mob. Not about Tommy guns and the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, but about milk and the expiration date you see on milk cartons. Here again, Jonathan Eig.
In the late 20s, early 30s, the gangs in Chicago did control the milk industry. They were racketeers. They took over any industry they could. They were big in dry cleaning, and they were big in ice cream. If you had an ice cream delivery truck, you were probably paying to the mob. So then there was an association that was in charge of the ice cream delivery trucks. And similarly, for the milk delivery guys, they were part of they were paying to the outfit. And one of the ideas that some of these guys in the mob had was, hey, we should put expiration dates on the milk bottle so people know that the milk they're getting is fresh. That really was a mob-oriented initiative. So you can thank the mob today for the milk date on your carton of milk, for the expiration date on your carton of milk.
That's it for this episode of C-SPAN's The Weekly. Of course, because it's Valentine's Day, we probably should follow tradition and offer a touching, lovely, and heartfelt poem. Here's one, inspired by that last clip. Instead of a fine Bordeaux and freshly caught lobster, enjoy some unexpired milk and thank a mobster. And now, a Valentine's Day bonus poem. Roses are red, violets are blue. Search the C-SPAN video library to learn something new. For now, thanks for listening, happy searching, and happy Valentine's Day.